Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, welcome to another episode of the Chaps Chat Cats. My name's Jake, joined by the one and only Mr. Sambo. How are you?
Good. It's only just occurred to me, and obviously this is completely useless for any of the audio listeners here. The whole pre discussion before hitting record, I didn't even notice that you're wearing the sunglasses. Is this for?
I thought
Is this for form or function?
It's the off-season escape.
Okay. You're not hiding some
yellow,
horrifying pink eye or something.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. But I have to set up the habit now.
Right on the eyeball.
Sometimes I wear glasses, sunglasses, that then when I need to cover something up, it doesn't seem as unnatural. We are, of course, I've got to mention this part.
The pink eye cover up.
That's right. That's right. You've got to do it. You've got to have a plan in place. Sort of going full, I don't know, Jason Bourne on a potential eventual pink eye situation. Got to be a few steps ahead.
I can't believe how prepared he was to hide that pink eye.
That's right. Yes. So
he needs some milk.
We are a part of the Hoops Crew Media Network. Should have mentioned that off the top. Didn't. We were too eager to get into a discussion about potential pink eye cover up.
More important.
Absolutely. On today's episode of the Chaps Chat Cats, we are going to be talking about cats who need a big 2025. Talk a lot about it on the pod. That there's a lot of different storylines. Yes, the team wants to win a flag. They want to make finals, all that sort of thing. But on an individual level, each season means different things to different players as they look to keep their spot, in the starting 23, earn their spot in. Maybe they want to keep their place on the list. Maybe they're looking to advertise their wares to other clubs as they look for an opportunity elsewhere. You just never know. But we want to talk about cats who need a big 2025. Now, we're going to do probably 20, 25 minutes of that, discuss 4 or 5 main players that we think. Then we're going to go on Patreon and discuss a few more on the list. If you want to get the Patreon part of the show, which turns your 20, 25-minute show into a 40, 45, sometimes an hour show, go on over, start a 7-day free trial on the Hoops Crew Patreon. You get early access to different things. You get extended versions of our podcast. It's a lot of Patreon exclusive stuff once the season starts properly. Like I'll do VFL coverage. So you can sort of get the inside track on how different prospects are playing in the twos for both the men and women. So go on over, start a 7-day free trial there. And Sambo, of course, before we get into the show, we need to say a big Hoops Crew Media Network thank you to our Media Network sponsor, Cyril Cook Florist. You can visit them at www.cyrilcookflorist.com.au. Make sure you spell Cook with an E at the end. You can phone them up on 035 222 2244. Or if you want to make use of a 20% in-store discount, go on over, visit them at Shop 12, 11 Leather Street in Breakwater. Tell them that the Hoops Crew sent you. They will knock 20% off your next in-store purchase at Cyril Cook Florist. So we thank them for their sponsorship of not just our show, but the entire Hoops Crew Media Network. Let's jump in, Sambo. Gonna start here. Talking about a player, premiership player. I've written down his Kaji Greaves medal winner. I should probably double check that, to be completely honest. Colin isn't the best fact checker, but I'm sure Cam Guthrie is the player we're talking about. I'm sure he's won a Kaji Greaves medal winner. And if not, someone in the YouTube channel comments, I'm sure will say that I'm an absolute moron. Cam Guthrie, he was hitting career best footy in 2021/2022. He averaged 26.6 disposals, 4.5 tackles, and 4.6 clearances In that time, he had a direct hand in 36 Geelong goals. 20 of them were assists, 16 of his own boot. However, just as we were looking at him to step into the post-Selwood breach in 2023, injury struck and it hasn't let up since. In the last 2 seasons, he's managed just 10 games, ending 2023 and beginning 2024 with an injury on the first possession of the match sim. He hasn't been awful when he's got back on the field for the last 2 years. He's averaged 20.1 disposals, 4.2 tackles, 3 clearances, but nowhere near his best. He's entering his age 33 season, is Cam Guthrie. The final year of his contract as well, per footywire.com. So, in your opinion, how important is it for Cam Guthrie to have a big 2025? And like, what are the ramifications if he doesn't? Like, what happens there if Cam Guthrie doesn't have a bounce back year?
I mean, I don't know. Like, it's hard to put aside your sentimentality, and I think, to be fair, I think it's not just hard for us armchair experts. It would also be hard internally within the club too. And I do think the Cats are pretty good, in my opinion. The Scott era Cats obviously started with a lot of axings, but I think since that kind of point, I think they are pretty good at giving a lot of runway to players to get back or to prove their worth. Like, I don't think we're overly brutal. So I don't think it's a case of necessarily, he has a poor 2025 and just gets completely, dropped, no questions asked sort of thing. But it really depends. And again, a bit of a political answer here. It's probably going to be the same for all of this. It depends in what manner, were he to have a not be, like a quiet 2025. Like, is it because of injury again? I think if it's injury plagued again, I think the ramifications are large from a personal point of view. Like, I imagine he would probably strongly consider retirement. 33, you've missed, the best, the best amount of 3+ years of footy at that point. Like, I think from a personal point of view, he'd strongly consider retirement. I think you just have to. From a club point of view, if he's back, if he plays, 75, 80% of games, and is just not punching those big numbers, I think the ramifications could be fairly large. Again, for him, like, I think we've got a lot of players pushing into that area now. So I don't think it's a case of we can't win, games. We can't win the whole thing without Cam Guthrie firing. I think it would be, like, far and away the easiest avenue to an effective midfield to have Cam Guthrie back in there at, career best form. But yeah, I don't think he's the kind of player that we keep in there for say another season or two after this, if he's at like 65-70% efficiency. That's my feeling. Like, with what he brings, you need volume out of him. Like, he's not a high impact per possession player. I don't think he's winning games with 20 touches. Like, I think you need him to be the guy that's pushing 30s consistently. So I think it is a bit of a high bar for failure. For failure, the right way to put it. Like, as in, I think he could come back, he could play every game and be a pretty decent footballer, but not necessarily be hitting the marks that we need. Like, I don't think you want him coming in doing numbers that Tanner Bruin's done for 2 years. I think it's fine for Bruin because, like, you're accepting that he's working his way into the side. He's still young. He's pushing towards something. But unfortunately, I do think you want Guthrie to be healthy and just come back in and be playing as if he never left by about the midway of the season.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. And it's like, I can imagine, as you said, if it's injury interrupted again, then retirement might start to be a factor. Like I said, 10 games in 2 years. If it's another thing like that and you end up, you've played 16 games in 3 years, entering age 34, that'd be a tough one to think you're going to get back from it. But then there's scenarios where he plays sort of just average. And in that case, if he got healthy and played all the games, say, and was like, okay, I could imagine it being like, we're doing a 1-year extension or something like that. Because it's like, well, okay, maybe he's got another year of footy under his belt. Maybe he's back to his best next year. And obviously, best case scenario from his point of view, he gets back to averaging that 25, 26 touches and probably gets a 2 or 3 year maybe finish to his career at the Cats. But yeah, I think he's the biggest name on this list. And so I've sort of led with him. We're going to go back and forwards here. So I'll let you tee up the next player we want to talk about here, having spoken about Cam Guthrie.
Just quickly, I had one more question about Guthrie. Sorry to ruin your segue.
No.
Is he the kind of player for you that, say he's not? So I was pretty harsh when I said you want to be hitting 30s every time to be like the player that he was and we need. But in your opinion, is he the kind of player where if he's not hitting those numbers, but he's playing pretty consistent football, that do you think you put him into a different position, a position that's not so, just like the engine room needing to be getting sheer volume, but you can use his efficiency? Like, it's a bit weird because it feels like so long since we've seen him play consistently. It's a bit hard to know, but is he the kind of player that you could see like playing out a year or two in like a Mitch Duncan role, where he like plays halfback to rack up some possessions, pushes up to try and support the push forward?
Yeah. 100%. I think he's got enough skills, enough sort of strings to his bow that you could trial him somewhere different. Like, I think the Mitch Duncan one is definitely a place. Like, if those two are healthy, I'd prefer to put Cam Guthrie off halfback or something like that. I think, if both were healthy. But yeah, I think they'll try and make it work. Put it that way. I think they'll give him every opportunity they can in 2025 to earn an extension. As you said, they are patient with people, and I think you've got to be, because who knows? He may just need, an okay year, and then age 34, 35 season, maybe he does come good. But I'm really worried about the injury part of it, even just leaving the form out of it. I just think it's really, it's worrisome. But yeah, I think there's enough dynamism to his game that he could play maybe an altered role.
Yeah, I think we will be. There'll be some fingernail biting every time he goes near the ball for a few games.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to your segue to our next player, Mitch Knevitt. He's been with the Cats 3 seasons. Obviously, he's a name that I think most Cats fans would know now. He probably is what you'd call a fringe player, but because he's been in and out so much, I think everyone's had a chance to to get a good look at him. He's played only the 14 times at AFL level, averaging 10.3 disposals, 3.3 marks, 2.3 tackles, and 0.6 clearances a game. Adding on to that too, inside 50s per game on average. He's shown a lot of promise at VFL level, averaging 22.7 disposals, nearly 5 marks a game. Like his performance at VFL level is kind of night and day compared to when he jumps up and sort of grabbing that form. Seems to be a really elusive target at the AFL level. Probably his best game was it against Bulldogs, I think. When he had 17 disposals, 7 tackles, 5 inside 50s, and a goal in 2023. But he was dropped after that, and he sort of hasn't really had a consistent run in terms of game time. And when he has had a consistent run of game time, he hasn't necessarily been able to convert that into any real run of form. But he's a player we all like. We've seen what he can do. We've seen what he's capable of. So there's flashes of it. What are your thoughts? How long has he got left? He's got maybe 2 years on his contract. Is that right?
Through to the end of 2026.
Yeah, and I think you made the point, Jake, that you can draw comparisons to Zach Guthrie, who struggled to put his game together for 5 years but then he's become one of those just absolute key cogs in the team. Do you see a similar path for Knevitt to Zach Guthrie? Like, what's the likelihood of that in your opinion? And if not, what are the ramifications of a quiet 2025?
I think the ramifications of like a quiet 2025 for Mitch Knevitt would be that you are right on the hot seat in 2026. You know, like I don't know if I think Zach Guthrie is there was a point I kept making on Twitter last year was like people would say, you know, Knevitt comes in, he doesn't look up for it, he doesn't, you know, he's too slow or he's not feisty enough, he doesn't throw his body around, he's not physical enough, not fast enough, whatever it might be. And it's hard to refute that. Like, he hasn't looked brilliant when he's played. I was at that Bulldogs game in 2023. He kicked a goal right on halftime to put the Cats ahead, I think it was. And then I think he played one more game for them that season, the last game of the year against the Dogs again when we lost down at Cardinia Park with the Resi side. I think you do have to look at the Zach Guthrie. 9 games year 1, 7 games in year 2, then sort of regress. 1 game 2019, 3 games in 2020, 13 in 2021, and then since he's played over 20 games every season. Like, it took 5 years. You know, and 4 years of really being kind of in the wilderness on the list to start making his mark. And I think Mitch Knevitt's the same. Like, I think when you look at him coming out of the draft, he's big, tall sort of frame. Like, he's got a big frame to fill out. And I've sort of contended that it's just going to take him longer. There's more limb to fill out with muscle. It's going to take him longer to build power in his frame. But I thought you could see him starting to put all the pieces together last year in the VFL. And I thought it was interesting, the contrast, you know, when finals rocked around and, you know, Mitch Hardy, who had been dominant in the regular season, he sort of faded to the background once the pressure raised. And players like Mitch Knevitt and you know, Ted Clohesy, who we might talk about in a bit, they actually they were up for it. They weren't perfect, but they still had games that were similar to what they'd done in the regular season. So I don't think his list spot is in danger unless he has an absolute shocker, in which case I think his list spot would be fine anyway because he's got a contract to 2026, and I don't think you're going to be able to trade him if he has a shocker. I'd like to see him play like close to double-digit games, I think. You know, I'd love to see him play in the range of half a dozen to a dozen matches, even if some of those are sub games or whatever. I just think you want to see him putting a little bit more of it together. I think he's versatile. I think you could play him off half back. I think he can play out on a wing. He's probably been hurt a little bit by the development of Ollie Dempsey. I think he could be playing, you know, out on that wing potentially if we didn't have some other players coming through. But it's not list spot in danger if he doesn't have a big 2025, but it would put a lot of pressure on him in 2026 because I think that 2026 in the Cats' mind, and this is my speculation, is like that's the end of the experiment in 2026. Either it's worked and we're extending you, or it hasn't worked and we'll be parting ways. Like, that'd be my guess. So, yeah, it's an opportunity. It's not his last opportunity, but I just hope to see another really solid year of VFL and where he's often that next man picked in the 23 when you're looking at the guys on the bubble sort of thing. If that makes sense.
Perfect. No, I totally get that. And I think I agree. He's one of those players that I think we like. I think the club likes him. So I do think you're right. I think it's the end of the following season. That's maybe the jumping off point. The didn't work. It's the pass fail grade at that point. You did mention Ted Clohesy, but we'll get to him. Not next, but the one after that. So next up, you wanted to talk about a big name and a big lad in Sam de Koning or de Koning.
Yes,
I still don't know.
I still say De Koning, but I might be totally wrong. But Sam De
Well,
Koning,
Chris
it's an
Scott says
interesting.
De Koning, that really, I'm sure it's De Koning, but once Chris Scott says De Koning, you kind of go, surely he's got it
Well,
right.
then
but
I'm converting here and now. All
Koning.
right, then Sam De Koning. If Chris Scott says De Koning, I'm going De Koning.
You gotta-
Sam De Koning began life at the Cats as a big key forward in 2021. He burst onto the scene as a 21-year-old key post down back in the flag year of 2022. He averaged 5.2 marks. 1.5 of those marks were contested per game and had 12.2 disposals a game. He looked like transforming, I think, into a true monster down back. I think we'd all agree. But form and health has taken a bit of a dip across 2023 and 24. The big man missed a handful of games in each of the 2023 and 2024 seasons, and his contested marking numbers really slid backwards in that time. There were some injuries, obviously, in our ruck department last season, and they thrust De Koning into the position. And he had an up and down ride, eventually missed selection in the Cats finals campaign. And some of that was like, oh, is he carrying an injury? Is he healthy? He played the VFL. I think it was a semi-final. So, he's healthy enough to play that. Only a youngster, obviously, he's entering just his 5th season of AFL footy. He's a premiership player, but it's also the final year of his current Cats deal. So, how important to you is a big year for SDK? And do you think he's playing for his spot on the list? Do you think there's a world where instead of TDK coming down the highway to Geelong, that SDK goes up the highway to Melbourne if this year isn't a big one? What are your thoughts on him? And even where do you see his best fit? Do you think he is that backman, or do you like the ruck experiment?
There's a lot to unpack. Just to clarify, so he's entering his 5th year, but did he play in 2021? Just because my memory's pretty hazy, or did he how many games did he play?
One game.
Okay, so
he played once. I think it was against North.
So really, he's entering his 4th year. I think it would be fair to say, really, his 4th year, and as you said, it's been marred by injury. So you could, if you wanted to be fair, you could round it down and say he's entering his 3rd year, really. And I don't think it would be too forgiving to say. I don't know where Cats fandom is on this. I'm not at all plugged in with Twitter or anything, or even opinions in the fanalist networks or anything like that. So I'm not sure if I'm on a different track here, but I think of all the people on this list, I think he's the most secure. That's been my feeling on it. I think, were he to go up the highway and join his brother, I think it would probably be a push from him. I don't see the club pushing him out. I still think to mention the great man again, the way Chris Scott talks about Sam is not about a man that's out of form, not about a guy that's got to prove himself. I think it was a direct quote in the back half of last year where Chris Scott said, we see a future where Sam De Koning is absolutely one of the 5 most important players in our team. I can't remember exactly the player that he was talking about because he was being questioned on form, and he said that one of those players that he sees being one of the key 5 players is Sam De Koning. That doesn't, to me, sound like someone who is going to you don't go from that opinion, I don't think, in one off season to then the next season be go, okay, you're playing for your spot, or we're gonna move you on. I think they're fully invested in his career, in his future at the Cats. I think he has dipped, but I think his high has been so good. I think if he played at the level that he's played at when he's dipped in his first 2 seasons, I think you'd go, he's great. He's on track. I don't think we'd be talking about him as needing to. It's just that it's flipped. His first couple of goes was so good, and then he's struggled, and he won. Essentially, even though he played in 2021, essentially his debut year, won the flag. He was just came out of the gate so hot. I think physically he dipped, but also just psychologically, it'd be so hard to follow that up. when everyone's basically saying that the sun shines out of your backside and you can't do wrong. You're toweling up key forwards from all around the league. You know, you're playing against people like I remember him giving Dixon an absolute bath a couple of times. That's a player that he probably was watching growing up, and then you're out there and you're playing against that guy and you're teaching them a lesson. Like, I think it's impossible to follow that up. I think the facial injury really threw him. I can't remember. That was in 2023, wasn't it? And it kind
of they'd put him in the ruck, if you remember that. Like, he was doing some ruck work then. I think that's when it happened, from memory.
Yeah, and I think that really threw him. Understandably, he came back with the Batman mask on. I think understandably, there's a few injuries. I think all injuries would plague on you, but for me, if I try to imagine having a back injury and then going back out there, I think I'd be really conscious of that. And the other one is face. If you got your face smashed in, I think that's such a visceral injury to have on a physical and psychological level. I think it would be tough to just roll back out and go, okay, I'm going to put myself in the way of that train again. Last time I was on the track, I got ran over, but I'm just going back out there again. So I'm hugely forgiving of a lot of his form over the last couple of seasons. I think I'm all in on it. I think the Cats are all in on it. I think he's a key back. I don't mind the ruck experiment. I don't mind him maybe moving up occasionally. I'll follow if they think he is a ruck going forward, then I won't argue it either. But I think if we look at the last season or two as his low and then 2022 as his high, I think there's an average in there that is still absolutely first selected AFL level key back.
No, I think I totally agree with you there. Like, from the moment you talked about out of this list, he's the most secure. Talented people of his size don't come along, every draft cycle, particularly when you're Geelong, and you're not picking high in the draft. And I think, although not everyone will be a fan necessarily of his ruck experimentation, like, the fact that he's got the ability to do it, the fact that he had like some career high numbers playing that position, like, it speaks to the versatility of him, the dynamism of him as an athlete. So yeah, I think, and it can't be forgotten either that it's been a big transition for Geelong since that 2022 flag. Selwood departs and we've slowly had, Isaac Smith goes. Now Hawkins, like, you've had a whole bunch of players leaving. Cam Guthrie hasn't been healthy. So there's been an experienced core that haven't been there. So, I think that's a good point too you make about the way in which people's development goes. If he'd had the last two seasons he's played as his first two, and his first one, 20, if he'd won a flag last year in the struggle season with the first two, you'd go, well, that's a normal progression for a young player. The difference is he's come out and looked like one of the best key defenders in the game in 2022, and now he's had a little bit of a bounce back. But no, I think you're right. I think you're talking a lot of sense there. I think there was a lot of people who were very in their feelings, maybe during last season when it wasn't going so well. But no, I think you're right. I think you've brought sense to that. We are nearly at half an hour here, so I'm going to call time on the public part of the show. We're going to take Ted Clohesy, who I watched a lot. I've watched every game of Ted Clohesy's Cats career in the VFL. So Sam's going to pick my brain about that. And then I'm going to ask Sam about Oisin Mullin. And then we might do a couple of quick fire ones from the rest of the Cats that are in the last year of their contract. So if you want to get that part of the show, we'd love for you to start a 7-day free trial on the Hoops Crew. Extended versions of our show, early access to other stuff from Ben and Paul during the season, VFL men's and women's coverage. I do a bit of a scouting type podcast telling you what I'm thinking of the development of those players, etc. So yeah, go on over, give it a whirl. As I said, 7-day free trials available as we speak. So go on over and get yourself one of those. But thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And until next time, discussing teams we most want to get revenge on in 2025. That is our next episode next week. So make sure you tune into that. And until next time, go Cats!
Go Cats.